So right at the top of Samach Zayin Amud Beis, first line. Amar Rava, brother of Yosef. Rava, brother of Yosef says, Shmei de Rava, B'Shem Rava. I guess it was a different Rava. Hi Mashkanta, this Mashkan, right, where Reuven borrowed money from Shimon and gave Shimon a mashkin, a piece of land, Asr de Misalki, in a place which provides for prepayment. Like we discussed yesterday, there are places that differ in Hagim. Some places have a minig that the borrower always has the option to pay back his loan and evict the lender. Obviously, once the loan is paid up, then there's no need for the lender to hold on to the mashkin. So in that case, the achilas peris of the lender in the interim, but prior to the borrower paying up the loan, loy nechel, so that you can have a problem that eating of the peris is going to be like a ribis, essentially. The property by the lender is still in the form of a mashkin, and therefore, when the lender eats the paris, he's getting something in return for lending the money. So if we have a problem of ribis, now if it's asher deloy misalki, where the lender can hold on to the property for a predetermined amount of years, so then the lender is holding it more in the form of a purchase for a period of time. And in that case, the payers are something he's entitled to because he purchased the land. But in any case, over here we're talking about Asr de Misalki. So we do have the ribis problem that the lender is eating the land, the payers. Loy nechel, he can't eat the payers, ela benachiyasa, unless he makes an agreement to reduce the loan, the keren of the loan, the amount of the loan by a specified amount each year. So let's say he borrowed from $1,000, and Reuven borrowed $1,000, and he has to pay back the $1,000 to Shimon at the end of 3 years. And Shimon is going to be eating, and he gives a mashkin, a soda to Shimon, and Shimon's going to be eating every year, $200 worth of paris, as long as Reuven makes up that each year Shimon is going to deduct or reduce the amount of the loan by 50. So at the end of 3 years, instead of Reuven owing $1,000, he only owes $850. That's enough to make it that Shimon could eat the $200 a year of paris. Because although, obviously, in the case we gave, the paris are more than the amount of the reduction of the amount owed, but since there's a risk on the part of Shimon that maybe he won't get any paris, maybe paris won't come at all, and even so, he's reducing the amount of the loan. So those paris are not treated as ribis. Let's see the Rashi who just says what I just said. If you take off from the chayiv a specified amount, l'shana, for each year, the nira kamoichelei, the yard besafek, that in that way it appears like he's selling him the paris, and he's using it, and he's getting it misafek. That filu chalkal yirba paris, even if it turns out that he doesn't get any, the crop doesn't come through in that year. You're not going to oisa kitzvah. Every year, the loan is reduced that amount. It's not ribis, but rather it's if he sold him the paris of that year for a specified amount. This is only necessary in a place where he has a right to prepay. But if the borrower doesn't have the right to repay, you don't have to come on to this nakiyas. So the Gemara continues. Someone who's a chashav Talmud chacham should not you do this. He shouldn't even eat with being menaki. He can't take the paris if he's the lender because it's distasteful. In the end, it amounts to a ribis. In the end, the lender is getting the paris. He's getting the majority of the paris without paying for it, and in return, the other person is getting money, is borrowing money. So what does we just said that Tzur Rabbanan should not do so. So if in a case where he lends money and he has a mashkin by him, he has property by him as a mashkin, how can he ultimately eat the paris? I mean, I guess the thought is it's not practical to have the sod in his rishus that he's working on it. It's just going to go to waste. He's not going to work the land. It's not going to produce any paris, and everyone's going to lose. So how do we make it that he can eat the paris? B'kitzusa, by using the process by a kitzusa, which is a variation of nachiyasa, a way to do nachiyasa that's a little bit better. So, and we're going to explain in a minute this mysterious kitzusa, but first the Gemara goes through a little bit. That's good according to Mandam who says that a lender who does kitzusa, it's allowed. According to Mandam who says it's also, you still haven't answered how he can eat. Now the Gemara says, now it says what it is. Kitzusa. They have a machlekes about kitzusa, what is it? What the din is. One mandama says kitzusa is mutter. If you do mekatze from the paris, then the lender is allowed to eat them. And one mandama says even kitzusa is also. Now the Gemara finally gets to what is kitzusa, this mysterious kitzusa that we've been talking about. The Amalei ad chamishnin achilna labaloi nachiyas. To me, so one shot is that he says the lender says makes up with the borrower. He's going to eat 5 years without any reduction in the loan amount. Meaning in 5 years, I'm going to get all the pairs. But from then and on, from after 5 years, I assume this is talking about where the period of the loan is 10 years or something. It's not just a 3-year loan. Otherwise, this would be pretty much moot whether he can get the way we say it goes for 5 years and then further. So the first 5 years, the lender gets all the payers. From then and on, all the payers go toward paying down the loan. So Rashi says, by structuring it in this way, what you're essentially doing is you're making a sharecropper agreement. The lender is getting the payers, but the payers are being divided between the person working the land and the owner of the land. The owner of the land remains the borrower, and instead of doing the typical system where the sharecropper, I think it's 30%. I think that's what the Gemara often talks about. Instead, the sharecropper is getting a certain amount of years, followed by the other years going to the owner. And therefore, the payers, in this case, are not going to be considered as ribis, but rather it's going to be a sharecropper's agreement. That's one pshat. Ikadamri, kol b'loy nachaisa aser. Another one says, no, this would never be allowed, because in the end, what you have is the first 5 years, there's no reduction in the amount of the loan for the payers, meaning the lender is getting all of the payers, he's keeping them. That's problematic from a ribis perspective, that 5 years of payment straight to the lender. And like we said, the borrower could pay up the whole thing. And if he wants to get his sada back, he pays it back. And then the lender keeps all 5 years. So what's the din of kitzusa? The first 5 years, the lender eats, but yar menaka, like we said before. Now we said that nachiyasa, nachaisa, is a problematic for tzurba merabanan. It's still not great because the amount of the Paris is more than the amount that's reduced in the loan every year. But mikan ve'elach shamin kula peri. So it's only for a limited amount of time that it's nachaisa, but afterwards, the entire value of the peri, instead of being just a small amount of the Paris that goes toward reducing the loan, the entire amount transitions and the whole Paris goes. So this is a better version of Nachiyasa or Nachaisa, because it's only for a limited amount of time that the reduction of the loan is less than the Paris that the lender receives. But after a certain amount of years, it reverts to being a full, that all of the Paris are assessed toward the value, toward the amount of the loan, and reducing the amount of the loan. So manda also bekamais shari b'basrais. According to Manda who said that kitzusa means the first pshat, that the first 5 years all of the pairs go to the lender. But the second case is better because the first 5 years, rather than all of it going to the lender, the first 5 years is nachiyasa. So that maybe that he would be maskim. Certainly, he would be maskim to the case of. So we said it's a machloikus in the case of kitzusa. So even if we say it's a machloikus by kitzusa, but in the second case of kitzusa, in the second pshat in kitzusa, both Rav Acha and Ravina who were chaylik would be maskim that if the first 5 years there is nachaisa, and then it steps down, to being fully all the parents going to the borrower, that would be fine. So then you could explain that would be what both according to, that would answer our question. Both Rav Acha and Ravina, who are arguing about kitzusa, we wanted to say, right? Our original question was, what is the tzurba b'rabbanan going to do? So we said kitzusa. We said the machlokes is about kitzusa. So according to the pshat, the first pshat that we said, that kitzusa is where there was nothing going toward the borrower for the first 5 years. So then we would say that even the Manda Amar, who says that kitzusa is no good, he would be maskim in the other version of kitzusa. That's not what they were arguing about. That is going to be good because that's a better, a less like option where you say that the first 5 years Yamanaka. Manda also asraisa heichi shar lemeichel. But if you according to the Manda Amar, who said that the machlokes between Ravina and Rav Acha is in the second version, so we'd certainly say in the first version he's going to say it's going to be asr, where nothing was going toward the borrower for the first 5 years. So again, we're still stuck. How are we going to be allowed to eat the Paris? It's going to be, there's a different option. You could do it like a mashkan desura. And the mashkan desura is really the same thing as an achaisa, but with a different form. It was written in a different form. What does he write? The kasviba hachi. This is what they write in the original group. B'mashlim shniya ilan. At the end of these years, tepek arada beloy kesef. This land will go back to the borrower without him paying any money. Rashi explains the Mishlam Shniya, delay Mechzik Halva. If you phrase it in this way, that every year there's going to be a reduction. Let's say it was $1,000 loan, and he says every year it's going to be reduced by 100. So instead of saying that every year it's going to be reduced by 100, all you say is at the end of 10 years, this property is going back to the borrower. So what essentially you're saying is the lender is keeping all the Paris, and every year $100 is going toward the loan to reduce the loan. So Rashi says the loan mechzik alvo. When you do it like that, doesn't appear like alvo. When you do it like that, so what it looks like is you're buying the Paris in return for giving. The lender had given the borrower $100. Now that $100 is being reduced each year. So it's as if every year he's buying the Paris for $100. So since even according to the Man Amar, even according to Man Amar, who says Kitzuta doesn't work, and we said that a Tzurma Rabbanon should not do Nachiyasa, but if you structure it in this way, it doesn't have the appearance of ribbis. Rather, it has the appearance that you're buying the property. I'm buying the Paris, since you never mentioned anything about the halva. All you said is that all your money, the property is going to go back after 10 years. That means that the loan is paid up. So you're buying the Paris for that money. Rapapa Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua Amri Travai. They both say, Hai Mashkanta Ba'asr de Misalpi. This mashkan, in a place where, like we said, the borrower has the option at any time, or we'll see it's not at any time, but after a certain amount of time to pay his loan and take back his property. So when we say it's Asher de Misalpi, so in that case, it blibes a loan. The loan is a loan, and the mashkin is a mashkin. Asha'eke, we said in an asra that with an misalki, where the borrower doesn't have the option to prepay. Let's say it was a 5-year loan, and so he has to leave the property by the lender for 5 years. So in that case, we treat it as a sale that where the borrower has an option to buy it back after 5 years, because for those 5 years, the lender is keeping it no matter what the borrower does. That is much more of an appearance of a sale. But if it's a asr de misalki, a place where you can't prepay, which doesn't have the appearance of a sale. Good morning, Menachem. We're in the middle of Samach Zayin Amud Beis. We're talking about the basic distinction, the threshold issue on a mashkin, which we've discussed a couple of times. Oh, good morning, Rafal. I was worried you gave up on us. Yeah. Let me just give everyone a minute to be Masada. The middle of Samach Zayin Amud Beis. So again, we're talking about in general the issue of Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, and when he borrows money from Shimon, he borrowed $1,000. He gave a mashkin to Shimon to hold on to, a piece of land. And in the meantime, as long as Shimon is holding on to this land, Shimon is eating the paris of the land. So that clearly appears to be a ribbis problem, right? If Reuven's going to end up paying back the money, the $1,000. In the meantime, Shimon is $200 every year of paris from the land. At the end, when Reuven pays back all the money, Shimon gets the $1,000 plus, let's say it's 5 years. He got another $1,000 of paris. So that seems like ribbis. So the Gemara says, "Ba'asr de misalki." This is only a problem in a place where Reuven can prepay. He can come after a year and say, I want my land back. And here's your $1,000 and give me back my land. Because then the $200 of paris that Shimon keeps has an appearance of ribbis. But if it's a place, Asr Loy Mitzalkin, a place where Reuven doesn't have the option to prepay, to pay back the loan and take back his property, because they made a term of 5 years. Reuven said, I'm lending money for 5 years, I'm borrowing money for 5 years. So Shimon takes the land. He knows for sure he has it for at least 5 years because Reuven can't prepay it and take back his land. So Gemara says that has more of an appearance of that Reuven is selling his land to Shimon with an option to buy it back after 5 years, right? Although we originally described it as a loan. But if you look at what's really happening here, what's really happening is Shimon is getting this land for at least 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, if Reuven could scratch together the money, he'll get back the land. But if not, Shimon's going to keep the land. And Shimon for sure has it for 5 years. So we say in that case, Shimon's eating the paris is not a problem because the land is really his. It's just that Reuven has an option to buy it from him after 5 years for $1,000.
Question: why wouldn't there be an option to prepay it?
There's certain places that was the minute that when you make a loan and you give a mashkin and you have a term on the loan, you can't prepay the loan. It's very common in mortgages. Certain mortgages.
Yeah, but that's understand because they charge interest. They don't want to lose on their stream of income.
Okay,
There's nothing, why wouldn't he want his money back if he gets?
Because I guess because it is more like a sale,
It's more like a scratch. It's not really a loan.
right? That's exactly why it's allowed for him to take the pairs.
So cash for my side. That's the minimum makam, right? It doesn't make sense, right?
If you can't have, you're saying if it's looked at as a loan, the minimum makam is essentially legislating ribbis. That's what you're saying. You're codifying ribbis. But if you look at it, they're codifying that it's not a loan, but it's a sale. Then it makes sense.
It's a sale with an option of Reuven to buy it back.
Right.
So it's not really a loan per se.
Right, and that's why it's not ribbis.
Reevaluating.
Okay.
Recharacterizing.
Right, what it is. Cause of the minimum makam.
So Gemara says like a bunch of nafkaminas. That's what we're up to. Rapapa of Hunabre de Vishua Amri Chabai. Hi mashkanta, this mashkan, ba'asha de misalki, in a place where we do allow prepayment, so it still is characterized as a loan. Ein bal choiv goy v'hemenu. So one nafkamina will be if the lender dies and he has the bal choiv. He's someone who he owes money to, the lender, Shimon, the one who's holding on to this property. But it's only he's holding it as a mashkin, not as his own property. If he is a balchayv, his balchayv can only be given from his karka. This is not karka. This is just a mashkin that he's holding on to temporarily. So the balchayv cannot be given from that karka. That's one way in which it's treated, as we're going to see in a minute. But masha'enkin, if it's the other way, if it's a place that he does not have the ability to misalik it, where the lender keeps it and it's treated as a sale, then if the lender has a balchayv, even after the lender dies, the balchayv could be good because it's treated as if it's the karka of the lender. Another nafkamina will be that in a place where he can prepay, and therefore it's not considered to be Shimon's property, a bechar only gets double of the actual assets of his father. So if the Shimon dies, his son, the bechar, is not going to get double of this property. All it represents, this property is a mashkin, and there's a chayiv that's owed, but a bechar doesn't get double of any. We only consider actual assets. We don't count chayivus. If someone owes money, that's divided equally amongst the sons. The bechar doesn't get double. So this is not currently an asset, even though in our minds, a note is an asset. But legabi, a bechar getting pishnayim, it has to be an actual asset. It has to be either a property in the hand of the. It has to be essentially property in the hands of the deceased. But this is only a loan that he's owed money, and therefore he doesn't get double. And finally, if this generally the rule is that a loan at the end when Shemitah comes, it becomes absolved. The borrower is no longer mechuyev to pay. So if we look at this as a loan with a mashkin, so the mashkin does not stop the loan from being dissolved when Shemitah comes. But if it's a sale, so sale is not affected by Shemitah. So we say, now we're going to say the opposite. On the other hand, in a place where the lender is considered to have acquired the property, so like we said in the first din, someone who owed him money, who Shimon owed money to, if he died, he can go take from this property. This property belongs in the meantime, it belongs to Shimon. So he can go take from it after his death. If Shimon dies, his bechar will take double from this property, which is considered to belong to Shimon. Shvius obviously is not going to be Meshamet, the property that he owns. It's not a loan. It's a piece of property that's in his portfolio.
What happens by Shvius if it's so
If it's a loan with the mashkin,
right? So what happens? Actually, in the
didn't-
first game, the ratio.
if he didn't make a prosbul, he's not gonna get his money back. That's why we make a prosbul every Shemitah, right? Then every Rosh Hashanah. It's yeah. As long as it has to still be gavui, if he has to take it away, it's not going to be able to be not to be collectible. Hi mashkanta, this mashkin, also the misalki, in a place where, like we said, you could prepay, so therefore it's treated as a loan with a mashkin. Misalkile, you are misalikim, meaning the lender. If the borrower says, okay, I'm ready, I have the money, and I want to get back my property, he takes back the property, even with the dates that have fallen onto the mats. They used to have mats to catch the dates from the trees. As soon as the borrower tells the lender, I'm coming, I'm paying back my $1,000 and I'm taking back my property, it's hands off. You know, like by the test, they say hands off. It's hands off on the lender. He can no longer take any payers, and he has to give him even the tamarim that have fallen onto the trays. It all goes directly to the borrower. However, if the lender had already picked up these tamarim, these dates from the trays and put them into baskets, kananeu, he was already kainit, and then he doesn't have to give it back. We're talking about obviously in either with, like we said on the top of the Amid, where he was menaka. There's different ways to avoid the issue of ribis. So he used one of those mahalachim. If you have kalim of a lekeach that are in the rishus of a seller, even though it's still sitting on the ground, I feel the loyagvana b'sisnei kaneh. We had said before that if he picked it up into his baskets, the lender is kind of doesn't mean bedafka. According to the Mandama, who says you can be kind of even on the ground, even if he took it off the trays and put it onto his baskets, and the baskets are still on the ground, he could be kind of with a kinyan of his kalim without picking them up. It's just a technical issue. The mats were not brought onto his. They fell down from the tree directly onto the mats. But then he picks them up and puts them into the basket. So according to the first shot, he has to pick them up. But according to one man, you could even be kind of on the ground as long as it's your own kalim. So it was the lender's kli. So then he could be kind of even on the ground. Pshita. Pshita. But after the misalki. In a place where, like we said, the borrower could prepay. But Amr loy mistalakna. And he says, however, I'm not gonna prepay, and I'm not gonna take over this land. And Rashi explains, at the time of the Matan Mois, he made up that the borrower can't get me out until a certain amount of years. So essentially, the minig is that you can prepay, but the lender said, I'm not masking to that. I want to make it. I want to make this particular deal one where you cannot take me out. So therefore, it should blind a sale as opposed to being ribis.
Where the question could be like in a place where it's not normally done. How can you do it?
Why can't they contract whatever they want? Why can't they contract?
That
was just
what would be the purpose of it? Why?
Because he wants it to be a sale. He wants to be able to get the Paris. He's a turban merabanan. He says, if I do this, then I can eat the Paris without having to. I can still sleep at night.
He knows Balafis.
Yeah. He wants to avoid the ribis problem. Listen, if the borrower, he definitely has the borrower has him over the barrel, right? He has a lot of leverage. So if he wants to do that, he could do that. So the Gemara, that he could do. So that's the loy mistalakna, and therefore it's going to work. Ela ba'asu the loy misalki, but Amma mistalakna. What about it's the other way around? And Rashi explains. I mean, this is a very hard Gemara to understand what the two tzadim are, but in this case, the din was that you really could prepay. Well, I'm sorry, where you couldn't prepay, and he says, I'm going to allow you to prepay. And Rashi explains this, talking about, Taisus actually explains this, talking about after they already gave the mice. And now the lender is volunteering to allow prepayments. Do we say that that's not going to work because there was no kinyan? You're just offering up something that's very valuable, a very valuable right you're offering to the borrower. Do we say there's a kinyan for that or not? Does it require a kinyan? Papa says you don't have to make a kinyan on this. It's only because it's only a minute. So he's saying I'm going to accept on myself a different minute. So it doesn't require a kinyan. The din is taka that it's a real financial loss that you're offering, and therefore it needs a kinyan in order to make it effective, and therefore the lender can't offer this after the matan moyes and just change the rules without a kinyan.
You can't do it as far as what? As far as being able to eat the fruits?
Well, it's going to make a difference. The guy be eating the fruits. Whether eating the fruits is going to be a ribbis problem. The question is it effective if he changes it after the time of the matan moyes?
Will it allow him to eat the fruits?
Well, in this case, it will make it that he can't eat the fruits. So it's really a negative thing that he's doing. This guy's being a little bit of an idiot, but because he's making things worse. The lender's making things worse for himself, but maybe he feels bad for the borrower. The borrower he sees is very upset. He doesn't have his property. So he says, don't worry, I'm not borrowing your property. I'm just, you can, anytime you want, you can pay back and get back your property. He's going to cause himself a ribbis problem. But,
So can Reuben eat the fruits?
Reuben, how can Reuben eat the fruits? It's in Shimon's property. You mean Shimon?
No, Reuben borrowed the money. So
right.
Shimon can't eat the fruits. What happens with the fruits?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. In the meantime, the property is in Shimon's Rishus. We'll see later on that we're going to talk about the lease buybacks, where Reuben will lease back the property from Shimon. But in the meantime, it's Shimon's Rishus. Whatever happens to the Paris happens to the Paris, but Reuben doesn't have a right to go down to the Sada while it's in Shimon's property, while Shimon's in charge of it.
So it's
just going to sit there, I guess. I mean, no. So we said on the top of the Yom, there are different arrangements you can make to allow Shimon to profit from the Paris. So you'd have to make one of those arrangements. Basically, he pays him a fee every year, or reduces the amount of the loan. Because after the loan was made, at that point, and this what we're talking about over here is at this point, Shimon is now changing the rules of the game. So the question is, he's changing it from a place that you can't kick him out. Well, you can't kick him out to a place where Reuben could kick him out. So the question is that change? Is that just a change back to a different minhag, which doesn't require a kinyan, or is it full-fledged legal change of the legal status and therefore requires a kinyan? It's really not relevant really directly to the ribbis. Question is not a ribbis question. So Dr. Gemara, Amar Ezel Ba'isi Zuzi. If Reuven informs Shimon, I'm going to bring the money. I owe you money. We're talking about a place where Reuven can prepay, the borrower can prepay, and he declares his intention to pay back the loan and take back his property. At that point, Shimon has been informed. Shimon can no longer eat Paris. Because it's now going to belong to, like we said, it's a drop the pen. It now belongs back to Reuben. However, if Reuben says, I'm going to go now, I'm going to go try to get money to pay you back, Ravina says, okay, listen, Reuben's trying, but who says he'll be successful? And therefore, Shimon could continue to eat. Mazutra breder Maryam lo yochel, he can't eat. Hilchos lo yochel. The halacha is he can't eat because Reuven has already declared his intention to pay back the property. I guess this is like part of the deal of that Reuven could prepay is that when he declares that he sends the notice to Shimon. So at that point, Shimon's allowance to eat Paris is over, and anything if he would eat anything more, that would be ribis. Rav Kana Rav Papa Rav Ashi loy achli ben achiyasa. So we had mentioned that there is an eitzah, even in a asr de misalki, even in a place where the borrower is allowed to prepay, there is an option of how it can be done that it's not going to be ribis, that Shimon can continue to borrow, the lender can eat the Paris, it's not going to be ribis. And that's going to be if the borrower gets his loan amount reduced by a specified amount each year. So let's say the property was worth $1,000 and they made a deal for 5 years, and each year the property produces $200 worth of Paris. And they make up that each year that Shimon is holding on to the property, he eats the Paris, and the amount that Reuven owes Shimon is reduced by $50 a year. So if Reuven will prepay it after 2 years, instead of the loan being $1,000, it will only be $900. So we say, even though that $50 a year is a lot less than the $200 of Paris that Shimon's getting, since there's a possibility that there'll be no Paris if Shimon's not successful, we look at it in such a case that Reuven is selling Shimon the right to the Paris each year for $50. And therefore, that's not considered to be ripped. So that's the way, that's like we said, this is one of the strategies they could use, even in Asr the Masalki, where it would be considered ribbis, by making this sort of sale of the Paris on a yearly basis for a set amount, it's no longer going to be treated as ribbis. Each year you're reducing the amount of the original loan.
And the reason why you're allowed to do that is
because
it's shy for the Paris month, huh?
Right. Yeah.
What's the possibility?
Because it's a sale. If I'm selling you the Paris each year for $50. The borrower is selling the lender.
Event, tornado doesn't come. Is that what you're saying?
You're saying it's not worth it. You're saying that economically it's a bad deal for Reuven. But it's a good enough deal that we can respect it for purposes that it's not ribbis. It means there's some risk.
Right.
If chances are it will. Normally it would produce more. But since the lender is taking upon himself the risk that his loan, the amount of money he's getting ultimately from Reuven is being reduced no matter what. So he has to work the land and get it, and maybe it won't happen. Therefore, it's not ribs. So we say, they would not take advantage of this. They felt, we said on the top of the Yomid, that a Tzur Rabbanan should not do this, like we said, because since the amount that the lender is getting is more than what he's giving up, it's essentially ribbis, and it has the appearance of ribbis. So they would not take use of this. Ravina Achel ben Achiyasa, but Ravina would do so. And Taisus explains, let's look at the Taisus Ravina Achel ben Achiyasa. Taim Delil, the Tzur Rabbanan Afil ben Achiyasa Leinechel. Tzur Rabbanan would not do that. So Ravina, yeah, I'm going to skip that part. Ravina did not treat himself as a Tzur Rabbanan. He was a big anav, and he held himself. The problem was with Tzur Rabbanan doing it is that people will say that you see the Rabbanim are taking ribbis. Ravina conducted himself in a very animistic way, so no one knew that he was such a Talmud Chacham. So it wasn't a problem for him to use this way of avoiding ribbis. Was a Marasai?
That's such an advantage, It's a mile to be, I don't know, if you can financially.
If you don't show up at the convention.
You always do the Nivas, it's such a positive. You have opportunity now to act like the rest of us. Yeah.
You're saying it's a mercenary Anivas.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why I showed you this place. I knew you'd like it.
Yeah, interesting one.
Omar Mazutra. My time at demand the nachiyas. How does this work? What is the where do we see such a thing that, like we said, economically, the lender is really benefiting? The possibility, like you said, a tornado is going to come and there's not going to be Paris is this very small possibility. Meantime, he's getting 4 times as much as what he's giving up.
Sounds like worse than this. I don't know.
Zak tomorrow. Mida dehava astei achuza. We learned that there's such a concept from astei achuza. Astei achuza is if someone gives his sada to hektish, the Torah says that he has a right to be paid it up till Yovel. Once it reaches Yovel and it belongs to the Kehanim, but for the next 50 years until Yovel, he could be paid it. And the din is there's a set amount that you paid it for. The Torah says, you could be paid it for 50 selah, and the 50 selah for a core, and the 50 selah of a core is reduced by how many years have gone since how many years it is till Yovel. So if it's only 5 years till Yovel, it will be, it's essentially 49 years, so it's a little more than a selah for each year. So if it's 5 years, it will be 5 sellers and 5 49s. If it's 45 years, it'll be 45 sellers and 45 49ths of a seller. So, but essentially, a seller is a pretty small amount, and a core is a big piece of land. It's not really the economic value of the land. It can be paid. So the Gemara says, even though every year he's eating, a lot more Paris than what it's worth, than what he has to pay to redeem it. He could still be paid it with arbazuzi, which is a seller. It's a very small amount. Just like we say over there, you could be paid to something for a small amount, even though it's really worth more. It's the same thing over here. By the lender reducing the loan by some set amount each year, even though that's a lot less than what the payers are producing, that's enough to make it that it's no longer ribs.
Are the roles reversed?
What do you mean?
I had the case of Sechuza,
It's not
the same, right?
It's not the same. The point is just that we can sometimes respect some things, a nominal amount, even though the economic amount, the value is a lot more.
Even though it produces more than 4 zuz in 1 year, Paris, so obviously the valuation
50 times or 100 times.
But because it's hectic, there's this concept of minatayra that you could redeem something with less, even though.
Right.
So to over here, you're able to
allowing you to say that it's a purchase. It's going to be treated as a purchase since you're paying some amount, even though it's not the full amount that you really should be paying.
Only $50 towards the loan that goes down, but
in the Paris is
too much more. We should be allowed.
Yeah. Now the Gemara asked the obvious question. Manda asa amalach sadeh who's a hektashi brachmana okma pigeon. Like you said, it has nothing really to do with each other. Over there, the Torah says you have to be paid. The Torah set an amount. So that's what the Torah said. It's not. There's no economic. There's no economic cheshbon over there. That's what the Torah dictated. It's Metzia. What does it help you that if you do something that still appears to be ribbis, doesn't help that they did something by
I was really thinking Hektish never had anything beforehand. They were happy to have your forzuz, Right. So the whole thing is just it's not a transaction. It's a din of Hektish. Right, like you said, it's a matan of Hektish. Amar Rashi, Amali Sabi, the Masa Machshir, Stam Mashkanta Shasa. A regular mashkin is a year. What does that mean? What does it mean a mashkin is a year? Lamay nafkamina. The achala shasi matzah masakla. V'loy lematzi masakla. It says even in the places where the borrower has the option to prepay and kick out the lender from his property, the first year he's not allowed to do so. That's what we mean. Mashkanta shasa. The mashkin he has a year. The guy Shimon just settled himself into the land. He's he made nachiyasa, so he's allowed to take the payers. He can't turn around the next day and take it back from him. He has a year. Whatever they made up. So, but the minimum of the mashkin is that if you're doing a loan with a mashkin of a property, that's a year. Things didn't move so fast. There was no stock market. It wasn't like you could do a transaction and then you have these
whatever these computer-aided transactions that happen every quarter nanosecond. You have to give it a little time. So that was the minimum. My mashkanta. What does the word mashkanta mean? The shchuna gabe. It becomes like a neighbor that it becomes his, that he becomes the one who's living there, and now it's his. Lamai nafkamina. What nafkamina is that where the word mashkan comes from, and what the implication of it is. L'dina de bar metzra. It's saying l'gabe the din of bar metzra. That means if Shimon got a mashkan from Reuben, and then the next door neighbor of that karka wants to sell, we know there's a din of the bar metzra that you first have to offer it to the person who's adjoining. So he's the shachan. Mashkan is a word of shachan. So now the lender becomes the shachan, and he has the din that he's allowed to buy the adjoining property. Amar Rava. Less hilchas aloy ketarsha papanoi. The halacha is v'loy k'shtoy mechuznoi v'loy k'chir narshoy. The halacha is not like any of these three things. We're going to go through. What are they? Ketarshi papanoi, ketarshi dera papa. Ketarshi de papanoi is like we had a couple of blot ago. We said that Rapapa was a beer salesman, and he used to, he would sell beer at the current price. At the later price, which was a higher price. He'd say, "I'm giving you the beer now, and you have to pay me later on at the higher price." Because Rapapa said, I could just keep the beer in my storehouses, nothing will happen to it, and I don't need the money. I'm doing it as a favor to you. You want to get the beer now? I know that the beer is going to go up double in price in 6 months because that's when they used to sell it. That was when the market was. So I'm going to sell it to you now, and you could pay me in 6 months with a higher price because I don't need to sell it now. I'm doing it as a favor to you. You want to get beer now? I'm not willing to give it at the lower price of now. So we said that that's not going to be considered ribbis, even though he's getting a higher price than the current price to be paid later. Since whatever the circumstances were, that Papa said I didn't really need to sell it now. So not allowed to do it. So Gemara is saying that halacha is not, you can't do such a thing. It really is ribbis. Because in the end, what Papa was doing was selling something now for where the buyer is going to pay him later at a higher price than the current market price. So therefore, it's ribbis. Shtori machaznoi. What is shtori machaznoi? The zakvile l'ravacha akarna v'kasa lebishtar. This is going to be very similar to what we're going to be discussing in the Mishnah on the bottom of the Yamid. It's talking about a case of an iska, where the way they would often do things, you know what, we'll leave the iska for tomorrow, because this is going to be a long explanation, and it's not going to happen, and we're going to still have to go back to it later. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and I'll see you, Be'ez Hashem, hopefully tomorrow.